Hi, everyone. This is Joe Dellicarpini, meteorologist with the National Weather Service's Boston office and a Norwood resident here to talk about the winter of 2024 to 25 so far. So we're early in the winter months being December, January, and February, but we're kind of off to a cold start. The month of December, the average temperature here in Norwood was about 34.3 degrees, and that's 1 degree below the normal of 35.3. January got off to a mild start, but we've cooled down a little bit here as we started the new year. The first few days were warm enough that it's keeping our average temperature around 36 degrees for the month, which is almost 5 degrees above normal. But the colder weather that's set in will certainly bring that average down as we head through the month. You can see a plot of the daytime high and low temperatures so far as recorded at Norwood Airport on the graph there, along with the record high in the pink and the record lows in the blue. The normal is kind of right in the middle in that tan band there. You can see we're getting to the coldest part of the year right now over the next couple of weeks, and then we'll start to see that average temperature warm up as we get into the latter part of January. As far as precipitation, that has been below normal. This includes rain and melted snow. Our total so far is 6.65 inches, exactly 2 inches below normal. You can see the normal curve is the brown line, which is in the middle of the graph, and you can see our 20, 24 to 25 since December is the green curve. So you can see we had quite a few rainstorms in December that really brought that total up, and it's certainly welcome after the very dry fall that we had through October and November. Snowfall, probably no surprise, that's also below so far this winter. We've had a total of 6.7 inches here in Norwood. Our normal is about 15 inches. And similar for Boston, 5.7 inches at Logan Airport. The normal is just about a foot of snow. So you can see we're right down at the bottom of the curve there where the green is. And our normal is, again, the brown line, which goes up as we head through the winter. Most of our snow really falls later January and February, so we've got a ways to go. And if you remember our record snowfall year, early 2015, when we got nearly 100 inches of snow in 6 weeks, you could see that curve right there. So this winter, we're really monitoring La Nina as kind of the main driver for our winter weather patterns. And as a reminder, this refers to the sea surface temperature anomalies off the coast of South America in this boxed area here. So when the temperatures are below average, that's La Nina, and that's what we're seeing this winter. When it's above average, it's El Nino. We saw that a year ago with the very warm and mild winter. So what happens is there is a bit of a connection between the ocean and the atmosphere, and that has an influence on the jet stream, which eventually leads to changes in the weather patterns around the globe. So we do expect La Nina to forecast is continue into the spring. The question is, though, how strong it will be, and we'll get to that in 1 minute. So just as kind of a reminder, La Nina doesn't have much of an influence here in New England directly, but you can see for the most part, the weather tends to be colder than average from Alaska down through much of northwest Canada. It's wetter along the Pacific Northwest and the Great Lakes, and drier and warmer than normal across the desert Southwest and the Gulf Coast states in a typical La Nina year. But really, no two La Nina events are the same. So we can look back and history will tell us what has happened on average, but there's always a range of outcomes being possible. Can be some outlier years that are kind of different than what we would normally expect. And the global oceans are warmer than they have been in the past, especially in the past 20 to 30 years. And, if we compare La Ninas back in the 50s and 60s, is that really a fair direct comparison because the oceans were a bit colder then? So just a couple of things that we always keep in mind. Now, for this year, the question is, will it be a weaker La Nina or a strong one? And the models that we look at are kind of showing a toss up. On the left, a bunch of these models showing for the winter here in the boxed area shows of weaker La Nina. This is about a minus zero point 0.5, which is just into La Nina territory. While on the right, one of the climate models shows a stronger La Nina down to about a minus 1. So it's really kind of a toss up as to where we will be. And that does lead to some differences in kind of what we can expect on average here in eastern Massachusetts. So if we look at La Nina winters in Boston, again, this is just limiting the months, not the entire winter, but December, January, February. We've had 28 La Nina winters since 1950. 7 of them were strong. 6 of them were what we call moderate, and in a majority of them, 15 were weak. So, if we break it down for all La Ninas, we can see snowfall, precipitation, and average temperature are all below normal. So, that's typically what happens in a La Nina winter. But if we break it down, you can see the weak La Ninas definitely have less snowfall, less precipitation, and tends to be a little bit closer to normal on average temperature, which is interesting. But if we get into a moderate La Nina, that's that -1 territory that the climate model was showing, we tend to have a greater chance for seeing above normal snowfall, but a little more in the way of precipitation, and it's also a little bit colder. So it's a subtle difference. But if we can get to a moderate La Nina, we stand a little bit better chance at least seeing normal or even maybe above average snowfall. So we'll kind of just have to wait and see how things pan out. The one thing we do look at more are the jet stream patterns. That really is more of a driver of our weather than things like La Nina or El Nino. And what we look for is what's called a trough or a dip in the jet stream in the east, a ridge or kind of a bump in the jet stream off the Pacific coast. And that's kind of where we've been here in early January since we've trended a little bit colder. It also favors storminess. This weekend, for example, first week of full week of January, we're seeing a snowstorm moving through the Washington, D.C. area, which will end up passing to our south, but favors East Coast storms. The opposite is when we have kind of a bump over the east and that trough in the west. That gives us warmer and drier weather over the winter. So we don't see that happening, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. So actually, the next 2 weeks are right here. So this kind of shows us the pattern on the left as of January 6th. Notice we kind of follow the lines to see where the air is coming from. And in this case, our air is coming out of Western Canada. It's not coming directly from the Arctic, but it's cold. Nothing completely unusually cold, but certainly, near average or even a little bit colder than normal. And as we go through the latter part of January, notice there's not a lot of change in our pattern. We kind of remain under the influence of the northern branch of the jet stream, which kind of keeps us cold. Again, the air flowing out of Western Canada, not directly out of the Arctic. So it's cold, but not unusually so. So overall, I think we can say with some confidence that the cold weather pattern is likely to continue in January. May also bring us some chances at snow now and then. But those details are a little bit harder to tell weeks at a time. The longer range outlook kind of follows that thinking, showing at least in the middle part of the month, good odds of below average temperatures, especially as you get to the southeastern United States, but also including us here in southern New England. Also looking at probably a little drier pattern than average, at least through the middle of the month. So this cold and dry pattern that we've been in over the past week uh, looks to continue, at least for the next couple of weeks here in southern New England. And then as we get a little farther out in time, looking, this is actually through the end of January, looking at really nothing's telling us it's going to be a warmer or colder than normal. We're kind of actually in the middle. You can see northern New England has good chances of above average temperatures, the mid Atlantic below. But it does look like maybe a trend toward a wetter weather pattern. So that might favor a little bit more in the way of chances of snow as we get toward the end of the month. And then looking ahead for the end of the winter and into the early part of spring, it looks like we may trend back to a warmer than average weather pattern here across much of the eastern United States. Again, a little bit more of a toss up when it comes to precipitation. Does look drier along the Gulf Coast and a little bit wetter across the Great Lakes. This might be more of a forecast that includes the La Nina influence more than anything else by that point. So, in summary, our winter so far, it's been colder and drier than normal with below normal snowfall. But keep in mind, we're only kind of about a third of the way through our meteorological winter, which includes December, January, and February. La Nina has emerged, although weak at this point. Our storm track in December was kind of mild, meaning many storms passed to our west, and we were on the mild air, the rainy side of them, as opposed to getting snow. But more recently now, we're seeing storms that are passing to our south, including the one this week affecting Washington, D.C. So we'll see if that storm track kind of stays down there and keeps us cold and dry, or if some of these storms can manage to work their way up the coast and bring us some snowfall. So keep in mind, again, late January, February, that's when we receive most of our snow each year. It's just a question of timing. Do we see any storms kind of make their way up the coast, or do we just stay kind of cold and dry as we've been over the past week? So, with that, I thank you for listening. If you have any questions, you can certainly drop me an email at the email address below. Otherwise, we'll take a full look at the winter and review during the springtime. We'll kind of see how everything panned out. Thanks for watching.